Zimbabwe's economic problems seem to be worsening. The fallout from the Ukraine invasion, a plummeting local currency and government interventions are all contributing to the skyrocketing cost of living there. With official inflation rates at 130%, the price of bread in local shops hiked 70% in just 1 week. But when Zimbabwe's finance minister, Mthuli Ncube, was asked about the country plans to deal with the crisis, his response was, what crisis? Civil society is, however, speaking up. For more on this, we're joined in the studio by Peter Mutasa, as the chairperson of the Crisis In Zimbabwe Coalition. Peter, thank you for your time, as always. It really seems like the finance minister and the cabinet is seeing a different picture to what the rest of the world is seeing. Just this week, the reporting on the price of bread going from $1 to $1.70, which in South African rands is 26 rand, and the inflation in Zimbabwe being compared to war-torn countries like Syria after it shot to 131% just last month. How is the finance minister getting away with trying to say there is no, in fact, the quote here is, what crisis? We are performing well. We have put measures in place to fight inflation. People should not panic. Everything is in order. How will that be read, firstly, by Zimbabweans living in Zimbabwe and then the diaspora?
Yeah, so it's crazy, and unfortunately for the minister, Zimbabweans no longer take them seriously. They know that we know that they thrive on propaganda. They try to paint a picture that is completely divorced from what is on the ground. And this is one of the reasons why we are in deep crisis. Zimbabwe is in a deep crisis. We can talk about the Ukraine invasion. We can talk about COVID-19. But all those came when we already had a crisis, a big crisis for that matter. So we are a state that is failing, and we are failing in all respects. So both people, the Zimbabweans within the country and those in the diaspora, especially those who are in the diaspora, who are the main players in terms of keeping the economy going, contributing almost a quarter of our budget through remittances, and also covering the state's failure to provide social protection. They are paying for their school fees of orphans, paying for medical care for the parents and for extended family. So everyone is not taking the minister seriously. It's a pity that they want to run the economy through propaganda and not economic fundamentals.
It's a very important point that you make, because if you've been working in the news, you know that we've been speaking about Zimbabwe's economy being in crisis long before we ever heard about COVID-19, and even more so long before we heard about the Ukraine crisis, which of course we know has had an impact on worldwide trade, and specifically when you look at the importing of wheat and grain. How much worse has the situation gotten, though, in the last 6 months, as it were?
So the situation is now much worse, and we are facing an implosion. As we speak now, Zimbabwe poses serious social, economic, and to an extent security risk, not just to Zimbabwe but to the region, to the SADC region. Our analysis is that Zimbabwe is in a big crisis, and it's a crisis of governance. So this crisis is manifesting in 3 levels. We have state-society relations. So I was reading the Zimbabwe Peace Project report. There's a lot of heightened political violence. Just in May, 195 people were attacked by the ruling party ZANU-PF, according to ZPP report. And in April, 163. As we speak here, More Blessing Ali, an opposition supporter, Triple C supporter, is missing. People saw her being attacked by non-ZANU-PF people, and she has been missing since 24 May up to now. The police issued a funny report, press statement, that no, it's a domestic affair. But even if it was a domestic affair, there's a person who is missing. The police's constitutional duty is to ensure that people are secure. They should be investigating that. So we are seeing a lot of shrinking democratic space. They are closing all democratic space. They are closing all dissenting voices. People are threatened for speaking truth to power. We are seeing the government bringing colonial laws that we never imagined will come back in an independent state. Patriotic bill. What we are doing here may be criminalized if it passes. I will not be able to speak to the foreigners, according to them, about the situation back home. We have the private voluntary organization bill that seeks to curtail the freedoms and freedom of association of the civil society organizations. Everyone is under attack politically. Economically, we are also seeing poor governance of the economy, and there's a crisis of governance as relating to economic relations and livelihoods.
If I could just come in there about the economy, because there's a lot of talk and calls for government to abandon the Zim dollar and adopt the US dollar, which of course the finance minister is quoted saying it will have a nasty effect on the economy. Now, if there's almost nothing left of the economy, how much nastier can it get? What is your opinion on what direction he should take in that regard?
There's no doubt the economy cannot be commanded by politics. The economy is determined by economic agents, and the economy is self-dollarized. The basic purposes or functions of money are no longer tenable to the local currency. You can't keep it as a store of value. You can't use it for transactions. People are not accepting it.
Yeah, because they're taxing purchases made with foreign currency now as well.
Yes.
Try and make it even more difficult. Is there a way of you to paint us the picture of what the average Zimbabwean's life is like? If you look at the inflation rate reaching 131.7%, here in South Africa we say, oh, hyperinflation. What does hyperinflation actually look and feel like to an average Zimbabwean, especially those that perhaps do not have a family member living abroad who can send them money and keep their family afloat, as so many in the diaspora are doing?
Yeah, so those who are in power, they are maintaining the Zim dollar because it gives them arbitrage opportunities. They can go and get US dollars and offload them on the black market. But they are robbing the farmers, they are robbing the workers. So, for example, the minimum wage for a domestic worker that was gazetted last month, it's only equivalent to 300 rands for working for 30 days. The minimum wage for those who are in industry and commerce, it's only equivalent to 750 rands for working for 30 days. It now makes economic sense for a teacher, for a doctor, for a nurse, a radiographer to leave work in Zimbabwe and come here and be a domestic worker. They will earn much more because a doctor, a teacher, they are earning less than 2,500 rands, a medical doctor. So salaries have been eroded. People on pension who have worked for 40 years, they are getting a pension of 450 rand, equivalent to 450 rand for working for 40 years.
Even as professionals?
Professionals. These are professional civil servants, people who are receiving pensions. It makes no sense for you to get a bus to go and withdraw the check because the pension is now worth almost $20, which is almost 300 rands. So that is not sufficient for you to go and withdraw the pension check. People are sleeping hungry. Families are now having one meal a day. If you have 2 meals, lunch and supper, you are much better. Yeah. But some are just having supper and sleep. And school children are dropping out of school. If you fall ill, you go to the hospital. The hospital has no medicine. You can't afford the user fees in the hospital. So people are dying in their homes. And it is a dire situation. That is why people are braving crossing Limpopo, crocodile-infested Limpopo and Zambezi, and risking their lives, and some are dying to try and eke out a living in South Africa or in Zambia or Botswana.
Peter, we're running out of time, unfortunately, but if I could ask you, it's a very difficult question because I'm sure the answer is many-fold. Where does the line get drawn? What, as part of civil organizations, speaking on behalf of Zimbabweans, where do you need the line to be drawn? And what do you need to see happen, in an international perspective perhaps, to try and arrest the situation in Zimbabwe from a political perspective, but more importantly from a societal and a humanitarian perspective?
Yeah, it's quite complex because from the 2017 coup, Zimbabwe is basically now a military state. The constitution has been suspended. It's there on paper, but in practice it has been suspended. Citizens cannot exercise their rights and freedoms to petition, their rights and freedom to protest and to demonstrate peacefully. But what we think we need to do, we need to continue to organize and mobilize citizens and wage civil resistance. And this is what we are doing currently. We are mobilizing. People are living under fear. It's a government that can shoot to kill people in broad daylight and using the military. It's a government that can get into homes of people, dragging people, shooting people, as we saw in January 2019. So it's a difficult environment for citizens. They are closing all spaces. So we are asking the international community, SADC, for example, South Africa, Zambia, Malawi, that they need to resolve the Zimbabwean crisis because it's a risk for all of the region. The instability in the ruling party itself may even cause much more than what we saw in 2017. But above all, the instability in Zimbabwe is going to add more pressure in the neighboring countries. So we want SADC to intervene and try and find how it can knock sense into the authorities in Harare and ensure that we do not have another disputed elections. We are going to for the 2023 elections. Nothing has changed. The police remains partisan. Traditional leaders are using food aid to buy votes on behalf of the ruling party. The institutions of states have been captured. You can't run to the police. You can't run to the judiciary. They are partisan. No safe spaces whatsoever. So we are heading to an election that we think is going to be bloody. The ruling party is definitely going to be more violent, as we have already seen. People have died for attending opposition rallies. People are being abducted in their homes for supporting the opposition. Civic space is closed. So if we head to that election, 2023 election, without intervention of SADC, without SADC enforcing its guidelines on democratic elections, without SADC enforcing its findings of the 2018 reports and ensuring that those gaps that it picked have been put right, then we are going to see worse than we saw in 2008 elections.
Okay, thank you so much for coming in. Peter Mutasa is the chairperson of a Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition. We thank you for your time this evening and for sharing those everyday experiences of the average Zimbabwean as they head into another year where we will see an election next year is when it's scheduled to take place.